The morning air at Peterson Air Force Base carried the familiar scent of jet fuel and metal polish as 17-year-old Destiny Carter adjusted her worn leather tool belt. At 6:45 a.m. the Georgia sun hadn't yet burned through the spring chill, and her breath formed small clouds as she walked across the tarmac toward Hangar 7. Today was different from her usual visits with her father, Marcus, who worked as a civilian contractor maintaining ground equipment. Today, the entire base buzzed with nervous energy. By 9 a.m., a delegation of Pentagon officials, defense contractors, and military brass would witness the demonstration of the F-35 Lightning II's new engine modification system. The project had cost taxpayers $42 million and represented 3 years of engineering innovation. Failure wasn't an option. Destiny had grown up in these hangars, following her father around since she was 8 years old. While other kids played video games, she learned the difference between titanium and aluminum alloys by touch. Her hands, already calloused despite her age, could identify engine problems by the subtle vibrations most people never noticed. Marcus had taught her that engines spoke to those who knew how to listen, but none of that mattered to Chief Master, Sergeant Robert Hayes, the man who ran Hangar 7 with military precision and old-school thinking. Hayes was a 25-year veteran who believed military installations were no place for teenagers, especially not young black girls from the nearby town of Warner Robins. His steel-grey eyes had been tracking Destiny's movements since she arrived, his jaw set in disapproval. "Carter!" Hayes barked as Marcus signed them in at the security checkpoint. "Your daughter has no business being here today. This is a restricted demonstration." Marcus straightened, his voice respectful but firm. "Sir, Destiny has clearance as my assistant. She's been working on aircraft systems for 4 years and knows more about engine diagnostics than most certified technicians." Hayes let out a short laugh that held no humor. "I'm sure she's very talented with go-karts, Carter, but we're dealing with $50 million of cutting-edge military hardware here, not some backyard project." His eyes fixed on Destiny with obvious dismissal. "Find somewhere else for your apprentice to spend the morning." The sting of his words hit deeper than Destiny expected. She'd faced doubt before, but never with such open contempt. Marcus placed a protective hand on her shoulder, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. He needed this job, and Hayes held the power to make their lives difficult. "It's okay, Dad," Destiny said quietly, though her stomach churned with frustration. "I'll wait in the break room." As they walked toward the hangar, Destiny caught sight of the aircraft that would star in today's demonstration. The F-35 sat like a sleeping predator, its angular lines and matte grey coating making it appear almost alien. Around it, a team of 5 senior engineers huddled over diagnostic equipment, their voices growing increasingly tense. "Temperature readings are still fluctuating," she heard one of them say. "The modification is causing thermal irregularities in the combustion chamber." Another engineer, a tall man with greying temples whom Destiny recognized as Dr. Mitchell Thornton from Lockheed Martin, shook his head grimly. "We've run every diagnostic protocol twice. The system integration is perfect on paper, but something's causing micro-vibrations that shouldn't exist." Destiny's trained ear caught something else, a barely audible whine from the engine housing, that the sophisticated equipment was missing. She'd heard similar sounds in her father's garage when fuel injection systems were slightly misaligned, but before she could process the thought fully, Hayes appeared beside her. "I thought I told you to stay out of the work area," he said sharply. "This isn't a field trip, young lady." "Yes, sir," Destiny replied, stepping back. But as she retreated to the break room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly what was wrong with their $50 million problem. Through the break room's small window, she watched the engineers work with increasing desperation. The demonstration was less than 2 hours away, and if they couldn't solve the engine issue, careers would be ruined and contracts cancelled. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the hangar, everyone except the teenage girl they'd dismissed without a second thought. Destiny pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, where she kept detailed observations about every aircraft she'd encountered. Her fingers moved quickly as she documented everything she'd observed about the F-35's engine behavior. If she was right about the problem, she also knew exactly how to fix it. The question was whether anyone would listen to her before it was too late. Dismissed and doubted. By 7:30 a.m., the tension in Hangar 7 had become thick enough to cut with a knife. Destiny watched through the break room window as Dr. Thornton's team grew more frantic with each failed diagnostic attempt. The sophisticated computer systems showed green lights across the board, but the engine's behavior told a different story entirely. She couldn't stand it anymore. Destiny left the break room and approached the work area, staying just outside the restricted zone Hayes had established. Her father noticed her first, catching her eye with a questioning look. She gestured subtly toward the aircraft, then made a small hand signal they'd developed over years of working together, the sign for fuel mixture problem. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. He trusted his daughter's instincts more than anyone else's, having seen her diagnose issues that stumped experienced mechanics countless times. But approaching Dr. Thornton's team would be delicate. These were some of the most respected aerospace engineers in the country. Dr. Thornton, Marcus said carefully, I wonder if you've considered checking the fuel injection timing sequence. Sometimes when new modifications are integrated, the calibration can be off by microseconds. Dr. Thornton looked up from his tablet, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool hangar temperature. We've run full diagnostics on the fuel system. 3 times, Mr. Carter. The timing is precisely within specifications. What if the specifications are wrong? The voice came from behind them. Destiny had stepped forward despite Hayes's earlier warning. Every head in the group turned toward her. Dr. Thornton's expression showed polite confusion, while Hayes's face darkened with anger. Carter! Hayes stormed over, his voice echoing off the hangar walls. I specifically told you to stay away from this area. Dr. Thornton doesn't need input from someone who learned mechanics from YouTube videos. Actually, Destiny said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, I learned by listening. And that engine is telling you exactly what's wrong if you know how to hear it. Dr. Thornton held up a hand to stop Hayes from responding. Despite his stress, curiosity flickered in his eyes. What do you think you hear, young lady? There's a harmonic resonance in the combustion chamber, Destiny explained, her confidence growing. As she spoke her technical language, the frequency suggests the fuel injection timing is about 3 microseconds too early. Your computer says it's right because it's measuring against the original engine specifications. But the new modification changed the chamber geometry just enough to require recalibration. The engineers exchanged glances. What she was describing was theoretically possible, but incredibly subtle, the kind of thing that might take weeks to identify through conventional testing. That's ridiculous, Hayes interrupted. Dr. Thornton, please don't let this child waste any more of your valuable time. The Pentagon delegation arrives in 90 minutes. But Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, one of the base's most experienced aircraft mechanics, had been listening from nearby. She stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Sir, with respect, I've seen Marcus Carter's daughter work. She identified a hydraulic leak in a C-130 last month that our sensors missed completely. Maybe we should at least consider what she's saying. Hayes's face flushed red. Sergeant Santos, I'm disappointed that you'd encourage this circus. We have real engineers handling this situation. Engineers who haven't solved the problem yet, Santos replied quietly. But her words carried weight. Dr. Thornton looked at his watch, then at his team of frustrated colleagues, then back at Destiny. The demonstration was approaching fast, and conventional methods had failed them. "Young lady, what exactly would you need to test your theory?" "Just access to the fuel system calibration controls," Destiny replied. "And maybe 15 minutes. "Absolutely not," Hayes declared. "I will not allow an unqualified teenager to touch millions of dollars of equipment." "Dr. Thornton, surely you're not considering this nonsense." Dr. Thornton was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. His career was on the line, but so was the entire program. Finally, he made his decision. "Sergeant Hayes, I appreciate your concern, but we're running out of options and time. If Miss Carter is willing to work under direct supervision, I think we should at least explore her suggestion." Hayes's face went stone cold. "Dr. Thornton, I strongly advise against this course of action. When this fails, and it will fail, the responsibility will be entirely yours." As the engineers prepared to give Destiny access to the aircraft systems, she caught sight of Hayes speaking quietly into his radio. His expression was grim, and something about his body language made her uneasy. She had the distinct feeling that the sergeant wasn't just skeptical of her abilities, he was actively hoping she would fail. The stakes had just gotten higher, and Destiny realized she wasn't just fighting to fix an engine anymore. She was fighting to prove that talent and knowledge could come from the most unexpected places, regardless of age, gender, or background. Time was running out, and the eyes of the military establishment were about to focus on a 17-year-old girl who claimed she could succeed where experts had failed. At 8:15 a.m., with just 45 minutes until the Pentagon delegation's arrival, Destiny found herself standing before the F-35's open-engine compartment under the watchful eyes of Dr. Thornton's team. Her hands were steady, but she could feel the weight of every gaze in the hangar. This wasn't just about fixing an engine anymore. It was about proving that she belonged in this world of precision and expertise. Hayes stood nearby with his arms crossed, speaking quietly but urgently into his radio. Destiny caught fragments of his conversation. "Need to document this properly. And when this goes wrong," his intention was clear. He was preparing for her failure and making sure it would be officially recorded. "All right, Miss Carter," Dr. Thornton said, his voice carefully neutral. "Show us what you think needs to be adjusted." Destiny took a deep breath and placed her hands on the fuel system housing. The metal was cool under her palms, but she could feel the subtle vibrations she'd detected earlier. "The resonance frequency is at 847 Hz, she said, pointing to a specific section of the fuel injection assembly. "Your modification changed the combustion chamber's acoustic properties by lengthening the flame path by approximately 2.7 millimeters. The timing system doesn't account for this change." One of Dr. Thornton's engineers, a younger man named David Park, pulled up the technical specifications on his tablet. "She's right about the chamber geometry change," he said with surprise. "We did extend the flame path, but the computer modeling said it wouldn't affect injection timing." "Computer models assume perfect conditions," Destiny replied, her confidence building, "but real engines have variables that don't show up in simulations. The fuel atomization pattern is slightly different now, and that requires the timing to be delayed by about 3 microseconds." As Destiny began making precise adjustments to the fuel system calibration, Hayes stepped closer. "Dr. Thornton, I need to stop this immediately. Miss Carter doesn't have the proper certifications to modify military aircraft systems. If something goes wrong, we could be looking at a catastrophic failure during the demonstration." "What kind of catastrophic failure?" Dr. Thornton asked. Hayes's voice took on an ominous tone. Engine explosion, fire, potential loss of life. Are you prepared to take responsibility for letting an uncertified teenager experiment with equipment that could kill people? The words hit Destiny like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on the technical challenge that she hadn't fully considered the human cost of being wrong. Her hands began to tremble slightly as doubt crept into her mind. Maybe I should
step back, she said quietly. If there's any chance someone could get hurt. No, came a firm voice from across the hangar. Technical Sergeant Santos approached the group, her expression determined.
Destiny, I've watched you work for 3 years. You've never been wrong about an engine diagnosis. Not once. Hayes turned on Santos with barely controlled anger. Sergeant, you're out of line. I'm ordering you to step back from this situation immediately. With respect, sir, Santos replied. Dr. Thornton is the lead engineer on this project. This is his call to make. The confrontation was drawing attention from across the hangar. Other personnel had stopped their work to watch the drama unfold. Destiny could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some faces showed support, but others reflected the same dismissive doubt she'd encountered from Hayes. Dr. Thornton checked his watch again. 37 minutes until the demonstration. Miss Carter, I need you to be completely honest with me. How certain are you about your diagnosis? Destiny looked at the engine, then at the faces surrounding her. Her father stood nearby, his expression showing complete faith in her abilities. Sergeant Santos nodded encouragingly. Even some of Dr. Thornton's engineers were watching with genuine interest rather than skepticism. I'm certain, she said, her voice stronger now, but I understand if you can't take the risk. I'm 17 years old and I learned this in my dad's garage. I know how that looks. Hayes seized the moment. Exactly. Dr. Thornton, we need to return to conventional troubleshooting methods. We still have time to run additional diagnostics. No, we don't, Dr. Thornton interrupted, his decision crystallizing. We've been running diagnostics for 2 hours with no results. Miss Carter's theory is sound, and frankly, it's the only new perspective we've had all morning. He turned to Destiny. Continue with your adjustments. But I want every step documented and every change logged. As Destiny resumed her work, Hayes stepped back with a dark expression. She overheard him speaking into his radio again. Yes, sir, I've officially protested this decision. If there's an incident, it's on record that I recommended against this course of action. The pressure was enormous now. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about not proving Hayes right. If she failed, it wouldn't just end her dreams of working in aerospace. It could end Dr. Thornton's career and potentially put lives at risk. But as her experienced hands made the final calibration adjustments, Destiny felt the engine's vibrations change. The harmonic resonance that had been nagging at her ear or mourning suddenly smoothed out. The engine was no longer fighting itself. Start her up, she said quietly. Dr. Thornton nodded to his team. The hangar fell silent as the F-35's engine began its startup sequence. For a moment that felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, powerful roar that resonated through every bone in the building, the engine came to life, smooth, strong, and perfect. The sound of success was deafening, but not as loud as the silence that followed when Hayes realized his worst nightmare had just come true. The teenager he'd dismissed had just saved the entire demonstration. Gathering evidence. The roar of the perfectly running F-35 engine still echoed through Hangar 7 as the Pentagon delegation's convoy pulled through the base gates at exactly 9 a.m. Dr. Thornton's relief was visible as he shook Destiny's hand, but the celebration was short-lived. Hayes's expression had shifted from anger to something more calculated and dangerous. "Well done, Miss Carter," Dr. Thornton said publicly, ensuring his words carried across the hangar. "Your diagnosis was exactly correct. The fuel injection timing was off by 3.2 microseconds, precisely within the range you predicted." The gathered engineers and technicians applauded, but Destiny noticed Hayes speaking quietly with two other senior NCOs. Their body language suggested an urgent, private conversation, and she caught her father watching the exchange with concern. "Destiny," Marcus said quietly, approaching his daughter, "we should probably step back now and let Dr. Thornton handle the demonstration. You've done your part," but Technical Sergeant Santos appeared beside them, her expression troubled. "Actually, Marcus, there's something you both need to know. I overheard Hayes on the radio earlier. He's filing an incident report, claiming that Destiny performed unauthorized modifications to military aircraft without proper oversight." The words hit like ice water. "But Dr. Thornton authorized everything," Destiny protested. "He supervised the entire process." "I know," Santos replied, "but Hayes is claiming you pressured Dr. Thornton into letting you work on the aircraft and that the whole situation was a security breach. He's saying you had no business being near classified equipment." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Is there anything we can do?" Santos glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Actually, yes. I've been recording the morning's events on my phone, just routine documentation of the engine trouble for my own reports. But I captured Hayes's confrontational behavior and his attempts to shut down a valid engineering solution." She showed them her phone screen, which displayed several audio files. "I also have his radio conversations where he was clearly hoping you'd fail, Destiny. He was more interested in being right than solving the problem." Destiny felt a mix of gratitude and
Anger. Why would he do that?
"I just wanted to help." "Because," Santos explained, "Hayes has been pushing for stricter policies about civilian contractors and their families having access to base facilities. If he could prove that civilians pose a security risk, he could get new regulations passed that would limit people like your father from bringing assistance onto the base." The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about Destiny's age or background, it was about Hayes using her as a pawn in a larger political game within the base's power structure. "There's something else," Santos continued. "Dr. Thornton mentioned that Hayes initially tried to prevent him from letting you work on the engine, even after you'd identified the problem. That kind of interference with critical operations could be seen as prioritizing personal agenda over mission success." Marcus looked thoughtful. "What do you think we should do?" "Document everything," Santos advised. "I'll provide my recordings, but you should also request copies of the official maintenance logs that show the timeline of this morning's events. And Destiny, you should write down exactly what happened, with specific times and quotes, if you remember them." As they talked, the Pentagon delegation was arriving at the hangar for the demonstration. Destiny could see important-looking officials in expensive suits alongside high-ranking military officers. The F-35 was performing flawlessly, its engine running with the smooth precision that had eluded the engineering team all morning. Dr. Thornton was explaining the morning's events to the delegation, and Destiny caught fragments of his presentation. Innovative problem-solving approach, and identified issues that our diagnostic equipment missed. But Hayes was there too, positioned strategically near the delegation. During a quiet moment in Dr. Thornton's presentation, Destiny saw him approach one of the Pentagon officials, a stern-looking woman with silver hair who wore the insignia of a deputy secretary. "There's something you should know about this morning's engine repair," Hayes said, his voice carrying just far enough for Destiny to hear. "It involved unauthorized civilian access to classified systems. I have serious concerns about the security implications. The official's expression sharpened with interest, and Destiny's stomach dropped. Hayes was making his move, trying to turn her success into evidence of his security concerns. Santos had seen the exchange too. "He's not going to let this go," she said grimly. "He's going to push this incident report as far up the chain as he can. So what do we do?" Destiny asked. "We fight back," Marcus said, his voice firm with resolve. "But we do it the right way. Santos, can you help us understand the proper channels for responding to false accusations?" Santos nodded. "There's a process for challenging incident reports, especially when they involve potential discrimination or misuse of authority, but we'll need solid evidence and witnesses." As the delegation concluded their visit and the hangar began to empty, Destiny realized that fixing the engine
Had been the easy part.
The real challenge was just beginning. Hayes had power, position, and the institutional authority to make their lives difficult. But they had something he didn't expect: the truth, documentation, and allies who had witnessed his behavior. The battle for Destiny's future in aerospace was shifting from the technical realm to the bureaucratic one. And in this new arena, the stakes were even higher than a failed engine demonstration. She pulled out her phone and began typing her detailed account of the morning's events, starting with Hayes's first dismissive words and ending with the successful engine startup. Every quote, every timeline, every witness, it all mattered now. The girl who had conquered a $50 million fighter jet was about to learn that sometimes the hardest problems to solve were the human ones. Fighting back 3 days after the successful F-35 demonstration, Destiny sat in the base's administrative affairs office with her father and Technical Sergeant Santos, facing a formal inquiry into Hayes's incident report. The sterile conference room felt suffocating compared to the open spaces of the hangar, but Destiny had spent the past 72 hours preparing for this moment. Across the table sat Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Williams, the base's deputy commander, flanked by Captain Jennifer Ross from the Inspector General's office and Chief Master Sergeant Hayes himself. Hayes's confident posture suggested he believed his incident report would be accepted without question. "Miss Carter," Lieutenant Colonel Williams began, her voice professionally neutral, "Chief Hayes has filed a report alleging that you gained unauthorized access to classified aircraft systems and performed modifications without proper clearance. How do you respond to these allegations?" Destiny had rehearsed this moment, but her heart still pounded as she opened the folder containing her documentation. "Ma'am, I respectfully dispute Chief Hayes's characterization of events. I was granted specific authorization by Dr. Thornton, the lead project engineer, to assist with engine diagnostics under direct supervision." She slid a printed timeline across the table. "This document shows the exact sequence of events, including timestamps and witness statements. At no point did I access any systems without Dr. Thornton's explicit permission and oversight." Hayes leaned forward. "Lieutenant Colonel Williams, the issue isn't just about authorization. Miss Carter had no business being in a restricted area during a classified demonstration. Her presence represented a security risk that could have compromised sensitive military technology." "Actually," Santos interjected, "Miss Carter's clearance was properly documented through her father's contractor authorization. She's been working on base aircraft systems for over 3 years with a clean security record." Captain Ross consulted her notes. "Chief Hayes, your report mentions that you attempted to remove Miss Carter from the work area multiple times. Can you explain why you continued to interfere with Dr. Thornton's engineering decisions?" Hayes's confident expression flickered slightly. "I was exercising appropriate caution regarding security protocols. When I saw an unqualified individual being allowed to modify critical systems, I felt obligated to intervene. unqualified, Destiny's voice carried a new strength. Chief Hayes, are you aware that I correctly diagnosed a fuel injection timing issue that Dr. Thornton's team had been unable to identify for over 2 hours using sophisticated diagnostic equipment? She pulled out her phone and opened the technical notes she'd compiled. The engine was exhibiting harmonic resonance at 847 Hz due to combustion chamber geometry changes that affected fuel atomization patterns. The timing required adjustment of 3.2 microseconds to compensate. My diagnosis was verified by post-repair analysis. Lieutenant Colonel Williams looked impressed, despite herself. That's quite specific technical knowledge for someone you describe as unqualified, Chief Hayes. Hayes's jaw tightened. Technical knowledge gained through informal training doesn't qualify someone to work on $50 million military aircraft. There are certification requirements and security protocols that exist for good reasons. You're absolutely right, Santos said, opening her own folder. Which is why I recorded this morning's events for documentation purposes. She placed her phone
on the table.
Would you like to hear Chief Hayes's radio conversations where he specifically stated he hoped Miss Carter would fail, and where he instructed personnel to document her failure for disciplinary purposes? The room fell silent. Hayes's confident demeanor cracked visibly. That's taken out of context, he stammered. I was ensuring proper documentation of a potentially dangerous situation. Captain Ross made a note. We'll need to review those recordings as part of our investigation. Destiny felt a surge of confidence. Ma'am, I'd also like to submit character references from base personnel who have worked with me over the past 3 years. She slid another document across the table. These include statements from Master Sergeant Johnson, Staff Sergeant Martinez, and Technical Sergeant Davis, all of whom have witnessed my work on various aircraft systems. Lieutenant Colonel Williams reviewed the statements, her eyebrows rising slightly. These are quite strong endorsements. Master Sergeant Johnson states that you identified a hydraulic failure in a C-130 that their diagnostic systems missed completely. She did, Santos confirmed. I was there. Destiny's diagnostic abilities are exceptional. She's prevented at least 3 aircraft from experiencing in-flight failures over the past year alone. Hayes was beginning to look desperate. Lieutenant Colonel Williams, regardless of Miss Carter's past performance, the fact remains that she violated security protocols by accessing classified systems. The demonstration involved sensitive modifications that Chief Hayes, Captain Ross interrupted. According to Dr. Thornton's written statement, which we received yesterday, Miss Carter's work was entirely focused on standard fuel system calibration. No classified modifications were accessed or altered. Her work involved basic engine timing adjustments that any qualified mechanic could perform. Destiny seized the moment. Ma'am, I'd like to respectfully point out that Chief Hayes's incident report contains several factual errors about the technical work I performed. Either he doesn't understand the systems well enough to accurately describe them, or he's deliberately misrepresenting my actions. She opened her technical documentation. For example, his report claims, I modified engine control, software, but I only adjusted mechanical fuel injection timing. His report also states that I worked unsupervised, but Dr. Thornton and his entire engineering team were present throughout the process. Lieutenant Colonel Williams looked directly at Hayes. Chief, these are serious discrepancies. Can you explain why your report doesn't align with the accounts from Dr. Thornton and multiple witnesses? Hayes's face had gone red. I was reporting based on my observations from across the hangar. Perhaps some details were unclear from that distance. Or perhaps, Santos said quietly, you were more focused on finding reasons to exclude Destiny than on accurately observing what was actually happening. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Destiny could see that the tide had turned. Hayes's incident report was falling apart under scrutiny, and his motivations were becoming clear to everyone in the room. Captain Ross closed her folder. Chief Hayes, based on the evidence presented, it appears your incident report contains significant inaccuracies and may have been filed without proper investigation of the facts. We'll be conducting a full review of this matter. As the meeting concluded, Destiny felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The truth had prevailed, but she knew this was just the beginning. Hayes's attempt to discredit her had failed, but the larger questions about access, opportunity, and who belonged in spaces like these were far from resolved. She had won this battle, but the war for her place in the aerospace world was just getting started. The reckoning won. Week after the administrative inquiry, Destiny arrived at Peterson Air Force Base to find the atmosphere dramatically changed. Word of Hayes's failed incident report had spread throughout the base, and she noticed respectful nods from personnel who had previously ignored her presence. But the real surprise came when she and her father were escorted not to the usual maintenance areas, but to the base commander's office. Colonel Michael Thompson, a distinguished officer with silver temples and command presence, stood as they entered his spacious office. Behind his desk hung photos of various aircraft and commendations from a 30-year military career. But his expression was warm rather than intimidating. "Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand, "I've been looking forward to meeting the young engineer who saved our F-35 demonstration." "Thank you, sir," Destiny replied, somewhat overwhelmed by the formal recognition. Colonel Thompson gestured for them to sit. "I've spent the past week reviewing the events surrounding Chief Hayes's incident report, and I must say the findings are quite disturbing. Not only were his allegations completely unfounded, but his behavior appears to have been motivated by personal bias rather than legitimate security concerns." He opened a thick folder on his desk. The Inspector General's investigation has concluded that Chief Hayes violated several Air Force regulations regarding equal treatment and abuse of authority. His attempt to sabotage a critical mission for personal reasons is particularly concerning. Marcus shifted forward. "What does this mean for Chief Hayes, sir?" "Chief Hayes has been relieved of his supervisory duties in Hangar 7 and will be transferred to a position where his personal biases cannot interfere with mission-critical operations. He's also facing formal disciplinary action for filing a false incident report and discrimination." The Colonel's attention turned back to Destiny. "But that's not why I asked you here today. Miss Carter, your technical skills and problem-solving abilities have caught the attention of some very important people. Dr. Thornton has submitted a formal recommendation that you be considered for the Air Force Academy's preparatory program." Destiny's breath caught. The Air Force Academy was a dream she'd barely dared to imagine, let alone speak aloud. Additionally, Colonel Thompson continued, "Lockheed Martin has expressed interest in offering you a summer internship in their Advanced Systems Division. Dr. Thornton was quite impressed with your diagnostic abilities and believes you have exceptional potential in aerospace engineering." The room seemed to spin slightly. These were opportunities that could change her entire future, opening doors she hadn't even known existed. "Sir," Destiny managed, "I'm honored, but I'm still in high school. I'm not sure how a 17-year-old girl from Warner Robins could end up at the Air Force Academy." Colonel Thompson smiled. "Miss Carter, exceptional talent doesn't follow conventional timelines. The Academy has provisions for candidates who demonstrate outstanding aptitude and character, regardless of their background." He leaned back in his chair. "But first, I want to address something that this entire incident has highlighted. Chief, Hayes's behavior reveals a systemic problem we need to fix. We have talented individuals in our community, like you, who could contribute significantly to our mission, but they're being overlooked or dismissed because they don't fit traditional expectations. The colonel stood and walked to his window, which overlooked the flight line. I'm implementing new policies to ensure that technical expertise is recognized and valued regardless of who possesses it. We're also creating mentorship programs to identify and develop talent in our local community, particularly among young people who might not otherwise have access to these opportunities. He turned back to face them. Miss Carter, would you be interested in becoming the first participant in our new Youth Aerospace Development Program? It would involve working with base engineers on real projects while completing your education. Destiny looked at her father, whose eyes were bright with pride and amazement. This was beyond anything they had imagined when they woke up that spring morning a week ago. "I would be honored, sir," she said. "Excellent." Colonel Thompson returned to his desk and pulled out another document. "There's one more thing. The Pentagon, delegation that witnessed your engine repair, has recommended you for the Secretary of Defense's Outstanding Civilian Service Award. The ceremony will be held in Washington next month." The magnitude of what was happening finally hit Destiny fully. A week ago, she'd been dismissed as just a mechanic's daughter with no business around sophisticated aircraft. Now she was being recognized at the highest levels of military and aerospace leadership. "Sir," she said, "I want to thank you for taking the time to investigate what really happened. Not everyone would have bothered to look beyond Chief Hayes's report." Colonel Thompson's expression grew serious. "Miss Carter, discrimination and bias have no place in the United States Air Force. When someone tries to suppress talent and potential because of their own prejudices, they're not just harming individuals, they're harming our entire mission capability." He stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. "Your success sends a powerful message throughout this base and beyond. It shows that excellence can come from anywhere, and that we all benefit when we judge people by their abilities rather than our assumption." As they prepared to leave, Colonel Thompson added one final note. "Chief Hayes has requested a transfer to another base. He seems uncomfortable with the new direction we're taking here." Walking out of the base commander's office, Destiny felt the weight of possibilities settling on her shoulders. The girl who had once been told she didn't belong was now being welcomed into the highest levels of military aerospace leadership. But even more importantly, the doors being opened for her would remain open for others who came after her. Hayes's attempt to close those doors had instead forced them wider than ever before. The real victory wasn't just personal, it was systemic change that would benefit countless young people who dared to dream beyond the limitations others placed on them. The triumph 6 weeks later, Destiny stood in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, wearing her best dress and fighting off waves of nervousness as she waited to receive the Secretary of Defense's Outstanding Civilian Service Award. The ornate room was filled with high-ranking military officials, aerospace industry leaders, and members of her family who had traveled from Georgia to witness this remarkable moment. Secretary of Defense Patricia Morrison, the same stern-faced woman Destiny had seen Hayes approach during the F-35 demonstration, now stood at the podium with a completely different expression, one of genuine respect and admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Secretary Morrison began, "today we recognize an individual whose actions exemplify the very best of American ingenuity and determination. At 17 years old, Destiny Carter identified and solved a critical engine problem that had stumped some of our nation's most experienced aerospace engineers." The audience included Dr. Thornton, who had flown in specifically for the ceremony, and Technical Sergeant Santos, whose documentation had been crucial in exposing Hayes's discrimination. Even Colonel Thompson was present, beaming with pride at his protégé's recognition. But Miss Carter's achievement goes beyond technical excellence, Secretary Morrison continued. Her story represents the importance of recognizing talent wherever it exists, and the dangers of allowing prejudice to blind us to exceptional ability. Destiny approached the podium to receive her award. She caught sight of a familiar figure in the back of the room. Chief Master Sergeant Hayes stood near the exit, his presence unexpected and unsettling. His face was impassive, but his eyes held a mixture of resentment and defeat that made Destiny's stomach tighten. Secretary Morrison placed the medal around Destiny's neck, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. Miss Carter, your courage in standing up for your abilities, even when others doubted you, has changed how we think about identifying and developing talent in our military community. When Destiny stepped to the microphone, the room fell silent. She had prepared remarks, but seeing Hayes in the audience made her want to speak from the heart instead. Thank you, Secretary Morrison, and thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey, she began, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. 6 weeks ago, I was told I didn't belong in a military hangar. I was dismissed as just a mechanic's daughter who had no business around sophisticated equipment. She paused, her eyes finding Hayes in the crowd. But I learned something important from that experience. When people try to limit you based on their assumptions, the best response isn't anger, it's excellence. The audience was completely engaged now, sensing the deeper story behind her words. I also learned that standing up for yourself isn't just about personal vindication. It's about opening doors for everyone who comes after you. Every barrier we break makes it easier for the next person to succeed. Dr. Thornton was nodding approvingly, while Santos wore a proud smile. Even some of the Pentagon officials seemed moved by her words. Most importantly, Destiny continued, I learned that the people who matter, the ones who value talent over assumptions, will always support you when you prove yourself through honest work and determination. As applause filled the room, Destiny noticed Hayes slipping out through the exit. His departure felt symbolic, the old way of thinking leaving to make room for something better. After the ceremony, as Destiny mingled with aerospace industry leaders and military officials, Dr. Thornton approached with exciting news. Destiny, I have something to tell you. Lockheed Martin wants to offer you more than just a summer internship. They're proposing a full scholarship program that would cover your college education in exchange for a commitment to work on advanced aerospace projects after graduation. The offer was staggering in its implications. Not only would it ensure her education, but it would guarantee her a place in the highest levels of aerospace engineering. There's one condition, Dr. Thornton added with a smile. They want you to help design a new mentorship program to identify and develop young talent from underrepresented communities. Apparently, your story has convinced them that they've been missing out on exceptional abilities by looking in all the wrong places. Colonel Thompson joined their conversation, bringing more good news. Destiny, I wanted you to know that our youth aerospace development program at Peterson has received full funding approval. We already have 12 young people enrolled, and they're all citing your story as their inspiration. As the evening wound down, Destiny found herself on the Pentagon's observation deck, looking out over the lights of Washington, D.C. Her father joined her, both of them still somewhat overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had transpired. Dad, she said quietly, do you think Chief Hayes will cause problems at his new assignment? Marcus was thoughtful for a moment. I think Hayes learned something important today, even if he'll never admit it. He tried to use his power to suppress talent, and instead he ended up showcasing it to the entire Pentagon. That's a lesson that will follow him wherever he goes. Destiny nodded, understanding that Hayes's failure had become part of her success story. His attempt to prove she didn't belong had instead proven that she belonged at the very highest levels. "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, you finish high school, excel at the Air Force Academy, and show the world that this is just the beginning," Marcus replied. "But more than that, you make sure other young people know that their dreams are achievable regardless of what anyone else thinks about their background or their place in the world." As they prepared to return to Georgia, Destiny felt the weight of responsibility settling alongside her sense of triumph. She wasn't just carrying her own dreams anymore, she was carrying the hopes of everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The girl who had fixed an impossible engine had become something more, a symbol that excellence could emerge from anywhere, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to prove their worth despite the doubts of others. Legacy. 1 year later, Destiny Carter stood before a packed auditorium at the Georgia Institute of Technology, delivering the keynote address at their annual Women in Engineering conference. At 18, she was the youngest keynote speaker in the event's history, but her poise and confidence reflected the transformation she'd undergone since that spring morning at Peterson Air Force Base. "When I was 17, she began, her voice carrying easily through the large hall. A senior military official told me I had no business around sophisticated equipment. He was wrong, but not because of my technical abilities. He was wrong because he confused credentials with capability and authority with wisdom." The audience of engineering students, professors, and industry professionals listened intently. Many had heard her story, but hearing it directly from her carried special impact. Today I want to talk about what happened after the headlines faded and the cameras went away. Because the real story isn't about one moment of triumph, it's about the sustained effort to create lasting change. Behind her, a presentation screen showed photos from the Peterson Air Force Base Youth Aerospace Development Program, now in its second year with over 50 participants from diverse backgrounds. The program had become a model for military bases nationwide. Chief Master Sergeant Hayes, the man who tried to exclude me from that hangar, was eventually transferred to a logistics position at a base in Nevada. But here's what's important. His replacement at Peterson is Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, the woman who stood up for me when it mattered most. The audience applauded, understanding the poetic justice in that detail. Under Sergeant Santos's leadership, Peterson Air Force Base has identified and developed more innovative solutions in the past year than in the previous 5 years combined. Turns out, when you welcome talent instead of gatekeeping it, everyone benefits. Destiny clicked to the next slide, showing her current academic achievements. "I'm now in my freshman year at the Air Force Academy, where I'm studying aerospace engineering, with a focus on advanced propulsion systems. But more importantly, I'm part of a new initiative to recruit and support cadets from underrepresented communities." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "I've learned that individual success means nothing if it doesn't create opportunities for others. Every door that opens for me needs to stay open for the next person." In the audience, Dr. Thornton sat with several Lockheed Martin executives, all of whom had become advocates for expanding their talent search beyond traditional channels. The company's new community outreach program had already identified dozens of exceptional young engineers from unexpected backgrounds. "But let me be clear about something," Destiny continued. "This isn't a story about overcoming discrimination. It's a story about the cost of discrimination to everyone involved. When Chief Hayes tried to exclude me, he wasn't just harming me, he was potentially sabotaging a critical military demonstration and denying his organization access to a solution they desperately needed." She clicked to a slide showing statistics about diversity in aerospace engineering. Industries that embrace diverse perspectives consistently outperform those that don't. When we exclude talent based on assumptions about background, age, or appearance, we're not protecting standards, we're undermining excellence. The presentation shifted to show recent innovations from the Youth Development Program participants. In the past year, young people in our program have contributed to improvements in fuel efficiency, developed new diagnostic techniques, and identified cost-saving modifications that have saved the Air Force millions of dollars. Destiny's voice strengthened as she approached her conclusion. Here's what I want everyone in this room to understand. Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. Every time you're in a position to recognize ability in someone others have overlooked, you're not just helping that individual, you're strengthening your entire organization. She looked out over the audience, seeing nodding heads and engaged expressions. And for those of you who feel like outsiders in your field, remember this: the people who try to exclude you are usually the ones most threatened by change. Your job isn't to make them comfortable, it's to be so excellent that they have no choice but to make room. As applause filled the auditorium, Destiny reflected on how much had changed since that cold morning when she'd first approached the F-35. Hayes's attempt to silence her had instead amplified her voice to levels she'd never imagined possible. After her speech, as she mingled with attendees, a young Latina engineering student approached her nervously. "Miss Carter," the student said, "I'm Maria Rodriguez. I'm a sophomore here at Georgia Tech, and I wanted to thank you. Your story convinced me to apply for an internship at Boeing, even though I felt like I didn't have the right background." "I got it." Destiny smiled, recognizing the same mixture of determination and uncertainty she'd felt a year ago. "That's wonderful, Maria. But remember, you didn't get that internship because of my story. You got it because of your abilities. My story just helped you believe in them." As the evening concluded, Destiny received a text message that made her smile. It was from Sergeant Santos at Peterson Air Force Base. "Watched your speech online. Hayes would hate knowing how many young
engineers you're inspiring.
Keep soaring." Later that night, as she prepared for her flight back to the Air Force Academy, Destiny reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The girl who had been told she didn't belong was now helping to redefine who belonged in the aerospace industry. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that true success wasn't measured by personal achievements alone. It was measured by how many doors you held open for others, how many barriers you helped break down, and how many dreams you helped make possible. Chief Master Sergeant Hayes had tried to write a story about exclusion and limitation. Instead, he had inadvertently authored a tale of inclusion and possibility that would inspire generations of young engineers to reach beyond the expectations others placed on them. The roar of that F-35 engine had echoed far beyond the walls of Hangar 7, becoming a call to action that resonated in engineering schools, military bases, and aerospace companies across the nation. And at its center stood a young woman who had proven that the most powerful force in any organization isn't the authority to exclude, it's the courage to include. The story that began with doubt and dismissal had become a legacy of opportunity and hope, and it was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, TB. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.